Welcome, everyone, for another episode of your favorite podcast.
That's just
my opinion. We do have, of course, me, Marlene, and my co-host,
Tracey.
So today we have a very, very special thing that we had promised you guys that we were going to talk about, and this is the Netflix documentary Seaspiracy. Before we go ahead and start, of course, this episode was brought to you by our mother network, AOTB, which is Aliens on the Border, and Border Town Pet Services. We'll go ahead and leave the links in bio so you guys can go ahead and follow us. Another really great thing that we're really excited to have today, guys, is we have a new friend, marine biologist Andrew, who is actually part of his own podcast, which is Speak Up for the Ocean Blue, for Ocean Blue. We have him on today talking, or I guess educating us a little bit more on this subject, on what we do wrong, what we can do better without, going to the extreme of just going completely vegan after watching this show and, boycotting completely everything that has to do with marine life and, taking fishes out of the ocean, et cetera, et cetera. We can go ahead and have Andrew here introduce himself a little bit. Andrew, go ahead.
Thanks, Marlene. Thanks, Tracey. I appreciate you having me on. It's definitely a pleasure to be able to talk about this movie and some of the implications and some of the things that they mentioned in the movie that may not be what it really seems that it is. My name's Andrew, as you mentioned. I host Speak Up for the Ocean Blue podcast. I've been a marine biologist for 20 years, and I've worked in the Gulf of Mexico. I've worked in the Arctic, and I've had the pleasure of working in the Atlantic and a little bit in the Pacific. And it's been amazing. I live in Ontario now, and so it's hard to be a marine biologist in Ontario without reaching out to the coastline. And I do that through podcasting and through just telling people. I started the podcast, essentially my friends and family just didn't really know what was going on with the ocean. And it wasn't their fault. There's just a lot of information out there on other things. And there are some people who are just rather keep up with the Kardashians than learn about the ocean. And so my goal was to provide a platform for people to hear about the ocean, some of the issues that we're facing, some of the challenges we're facing, but also some of the progress we're making. And by having people on the podcast they're friends, they're my colleagues, they're people I don't know who have been working on ocean projects for years and before I even started, and to be able to show the progress that they've made and some of the optimism that we see in the ocean. Because I think a lot of the times when we hear about the subject we're going to be talking about today, fisheries or climate change or ocean plastics, is we tend to get a little overwhelmed and sort of put the issue to the side and go back with our regular lives. And so what I want to do with the podcast is just ensure that people get to know some of the things that you can do personally, at home, as well as if you want to go further and do some volunteering or so forth. So I'm looking forward to being able to talk about that and fisheries today.
Perfect. I feel like that's a really big thing that we are lacking. So we're located in Texas. Again, my name is Marlene. I'm actually located in Laredo, Texas, which is like right next to the border with Mexico. And honestly, the closest body of water that is a river are probably like all the rivers going through Texas. Mm-hmm. And the closest ocean is the one that's in South Padre Island, which is like 5 hours away from us, or like 4 hours away from us. So I feel like there is a really big lack of education when it comes to what are we doing wrong with our oceans? What are we doing right? What is going on? Like you said, you did mention, advancements in technology, and not everything is bad. And some, things are necessary and other things are not that necessary. So honestly, watching Seaspiracy for us was like, oh my God, I never want to eat tuna ever again. And then I started looking into it, and I started, I honestly stalked you completely when I heard like 5 of your episodes today, and it just started all making sense to me, just because not because it had never occurred to me before, but because I didn't have access to this information.
Mhm.
So I feel like that's a really big thing that us Texans, or at least the majority, we're not completely aware of. So thank you so much for coming on the show today and, giving us a little bit of your perspective and giving us, honestly, access to this information that we wouldn't necessarily have unless we're out there looking for it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the first thing we should start, like the way I see it, when a movie like Seaspiracy comes out, controversial or not controversial, it's an opportunity for myself and other people who are involved in marine conservation. We call ourselves science communicators or SciCommers, and it's an opportunity for ourselves to educate people who are all of a sudden awoken to sort of a new topic that may interest them. And the fact that Seaspiracy has been on Netflix, and it's definitely made a splash. It's in the top 10 on Netflix in the US and Canada. In some places it's number 1. So it's definitely had an impact on a lot of people. There are some people who said they'll never eat fish again. Some people say they'll never eat meat again. They will go vegan. Other people will be like, no, this is ridiculous. I know better. I want to eat my fish. And so the thing is, or the way I see it is, this is an opportunity to educate people on the issues that we have in fisheries. Like some of the things in Seaspiracy were correct. The overarching theme is our fisheries in certain places are a mess. From an international scale, these super trawlers that we have, or these massive boats that are basically like the size of these shipping containers, that are just, they're just containers, like huge containers that can hold millions of tons of fish at a time. And so when you have that and you don't track it, from where it's caught or how it's caught to your plate, it becomes really difficult to know if people are doing it right or if people aren't doing it right. And that's where it becomes really complex. And the thing with Seaspiracy, I don't agree with most of the things that were said in the movie. A lot of the claims that they claimed, I don't agree as a scientist. Many of my other scientists feel the same way. What they're able to do is they were able to take some truths, but entangle it with misinformation. So it makes it just seem more extreme than what it actually is. One of the claims of Seaspiracy was that there are no sustainable fisheries. That is not true. We know this for a fact. Scientists have been doing this for years. There are some problems with certain fisheries, and there aren't problems with other fisheries. And so we know that this is available, but it's easier to say that there are no sustainable fisheries. Everybody go vegan. That was the overarching message of Seaspiracy. And a lot of scientists, and including myself, but a lot of scientists who are much better than I am and much more prestigious than I am, have come out and said that's just a false narrative. Now, with that said, if people can go vegan, have the choice and have the money to go vegan, because it's not cheap to do that as from a lifestyle perspective, then by all means go vegan. There's no harm in it. It will improve. There are certain aspects that will improve the environment when you do that. And a lot of places in North America, in Europe, people can go vegan. And if they do, that's great. That's their personal choice. But there are a lot of other people who really rely on seafood, and 85% of the population in the world will rely on some sort of seafood, whether it's cheaper for them to have, whether it's just local for them to have, or whether it's just better, like more available. If you live in a country where you are bordered along the sea, you are going to eat fish. It doesn't matter if you're in Texas. It doesn't matter if you're in Boston or Massachusetts, or if you're in Newfoundland. You are surrounded by the sea. You are going to eat seafood. It's just, that's the way of life over there. And I think what this movie does is it tries to paint an easy solution, like a simple solution to a very complex problem.
Yeah.
Like everyone should just go vegan, and that's going to make the world go better.
Exactly. And
we live in Texas, to where what can we really, like you said, it's like, yeah, we can go vegan, but the like whenever we get like I guess like whenever it's like fruits and vegetables and all that, like it's not that easy for us to get as many like vegetables and as many fruits. I mean, yeah, we can like grow our own, but it's super hot in Texas. Like you just can't.
There's certain things that we cannot do just because of climate. And now I'm so sorry for interrupting you.
No
but now
worries.
that you do mention about, some people have the luxury, or I guess in this point it comes down to privilege of being able to choose a lifestyle, when it comes to veganism or vegetarianism or, just cannibalism or whatever they want to do. I do know some people also just eat meat. I know that's just like, that's their diet. Like they just do meat, nothing else but meat. And there's, of course, I heard you mention also dietary things that you need for your own health. I was on TikTok. I was on TikTok and I ran into this Inuit girl. I'm not completely sure if you've seen the video. There's this girl that was calling out Seaspiracy on the seal hunt in Canada. I believe that's what is it?
Because they were like natives, right?
Yeah, so she was Inuit, I think it is.
Inuit,
and she was saying that they live in Antarctica and they do not have access to, just going to Walmart or going to, your local grocery store and just buying whatever you want to buy from it. So she was, shitting on them in a way and just being like, I would love to have that privilege. And then, all of these other people, of course, hating on, Indian Americans and, oh, it's because blah, blah, blah. And it just opened a whole other conversation. And then Seaspiracy did go out and was like, thank you for this girl that, made it, I guess, opened the conversation to us where we're talking about commercial hunting, right? Yeah. We're talking about commercial fishing. We're talking about whatever. But like you did say, Andrew, in the movie, it was merely directed for people to be like, I'm over fish. I don't even care if I go out and fish it. Like, it's just, we're not going to eat it anymore. And I feel like at the end of the day, that was the objective of the movie. And that's why it's so misinformed.
Yes.
It is.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting because this movie hit on a lot of different fronts in the wrong way, and it's been obviously we're on a podcast, so they can't say I'm a white male, right? And even I realized at the beginning, I'm like, this movie's racist, towards Asian people. Every Asian figure that was in that movie was wielding a knife coming after them. What the Thai police with when they're talking about the slavery was always after them, and it was always about him. When him being attacked. So when he went into the Cove, so Taiji, Japan, which is based off, there's a whole movie on the Cove. It's an awful thing that happens. There's a lot of issues that go within that, and they are the people around the Cove, the fishermen around the Cove, are already defensive about what they do. And they know that anytime they see a white person there, they are there in some sort of protest, just because from historical past, just from the Cove and other things. And whether you agree whether you agree with it or not, that's what they see. And so they're going to be defensive. You come in with a camera and a whole crew and start asking questions that are very against their way of life, they're going to start to come back at it. And they're more aggressive now because they've been through everything and they know the ramifications of the Cove, and they know that. So I don't agree with what they're doing, but I'm not going to go in there and start agitating them like he did. It wasn't necessary. When he interviewed, fisheries slavery is a thing, and it's a huge problem. Anybody who treats humans the way that these fisheries industries do, just like these fishery slaves, are god-awful people. May they burn in hell, and we 100%. Need to stop this. But it's not an easy thing to stop. But the way he went about it was all about him. It's this white savior going in to Thailand and interviewing these people. Now, you got to remember, the people are not slaves anymore, but they're in fear for their life at any moment in time. right? Because if they speak out, they could end up back on the ship. They can end up dead. Like, it's a life-threatening thing. Their security is not perfect. This guy Ali comes in, and he even asked them, like in the movies, like, am I going to be in danger for this? You're asking a fishery slave who's got to live there after you talk to him, you know, and then you're just going to leave. You're going to go back to the UK and you're going to be perfectly safe. Meanwhile, they have to live with what they've talked to you about, you know, and it's just like, it's, again, what we talked about is this white privilege going in. And it's almost like we talk about in science, we have this thing, a term called parachute science, which has still happening and has happened in the past, where scientists go into a community, and usually it's an underdeveloped community or a fishing village or some kind of village. They do their research. They maybe involve the community a little bit to help them collect data. They leave without sharing any of the information or anything they learned, and then they go and publish. And we call that parachute science, which is frowned upon. Like, it's something that we don't do anymore. It's something that, you know, we don't recommend. It's something that's bad. It's something that we've learned, and it's something that we have to get over. And it still happens every once in a while, but people get called out for it. This was parachute documentary, you know, where you just go in, get what you need, put people in danger, and then leave, and then show that you were brave to go into this place.
That you risked your life, and
you
know, you're the hero of it. And
and like, what happened to these other people? Now, let's talk about fisheries slavery, because this is something that is a real thing. And I went to a conference a while ago in Malaysia, and on the island of Borneo, and it was an International Marine Conservation Congress where people all around the world kind of came to this Congress. It was a really great conference. Talked a lot about marine conservation, but in that we gave an award. I had the opportunity to give an award out, and what we do is we give an award out to people who put their lives in danger for conservation. And over, like, in the past, I would say at that point, in the past 10 years, over 1,000 people had died doing conservation in areas such as Costa Rica, in areas like in Central America, in Asia, in various places, doing what they were passionate about, trying to protect sea turtles, trying to protect people, trying to protect fisheries. And they would get in the way of organized crime or somebody who doesn't want you to be in their way, and they would get harmed. They would get assaulted, or worse, they would even get killed. And so we were giving out awards for people who put themselves in danger, not willingly, but put themselves in danger, and we would give an award. And there was a woman we gave an award to who was from Thailand, and she created an organization that would go and rescue fishery slaves. So she would learn about people on an island, that essentially what they would do is they would drop people off on an island, and they would put them either in cages, or they would, like, literally chain them to a tree. And they would
animals.
Leave. Yeah.
Like, literally just like animals.
Like animals. And they would leave. And then when they came back to this island, if they were still alive, they would bring them back on the boat and they'd make them work again. Right. And so like horrible conditions. The way, like I said, the way they treat, these guys got to go right to hell. But she would go and rescue them. Now, this woman was about 4 feet high. She was in her 60s, and she would go herself on these little boats with people, and they would rescue them. Not only would she bring them back, but she would bring them into Thailand. So a lot of the people are either in the Philippines or from Malaysia or the surrounding islands, and they would be duped into going to fish because they needed the money, and then they would never come home. And they had families, so she'd bring over the families, and she would make them a citizen of Thailand. And they in Thailand, they get free healthcare if you're a citizen. So they would bring everybody over, and they would get free. And she would try and help them recover from what, you know, the events that they've gone through.
From the trauma,
which is very real trauma. I don't even know how anybody would get over that.
It's just completely unimaginable. Like,
it is.
I feel like everything has to do with it. Like, not only how they're treating you, but also, you know, the climate that you're in, like being out in the ocean, like knowing that, you know, you can literally die at any second because they can just throw you overboard, and, you know, that's it.
Yeah. If you get sick and you're not working, they throw you overboard, you know, because you're one less meal you have to feed, and nobody will know, right? Nobody knows, because they don't even know, like, there's no paperwork that these people are working. You know, we live in North America. I live in Canada. You guys live in Texas. You live in the States. There are rules in place for, you know, health and safety. You know, we know our rights. If we don't feel something safe, we don't do that. That is out the window. That's not even close to what these poor people go through. And so, you know, but instead of highlighting stories like that of people who are doing those rescue missions or people who have to go through and actually follow the people through there, through that process, that would have been a very interesting story, showing the trauma, showing the pain that they go through, showing the very reality that these people are living and that's going on an everyday basis. They decided to just do a couple of interviews, talk about how dangerous it was, and talk about how he's in danger, and then just leave, and then that was it. And show how he was affected by it.
Yeah.
Right?
Like, wow, thank you for your participation. Now that I have my information, I'm going back to the UK.
And good luck. And good luck.
Luck. I hope you don't get killed.
Yeah, that's essentially how I saw it. Like, it was a very, it was that white savior complex, we're going to go in, we're going to tell you how you should live. We're going to document your story to tell everybody, to let everybody know, but we're not going to help you. We're not going to do anything to help you and that kind of stuff. So like, that was something that really got me going on the film. A couple of other things is when he threw other organizations under the bus, and this part where he did a couple of interviews. Now, the way you do an interview, you guys are podcasters. You do interviews on most of your shows. I'm a podcaster. I do interviews. The best thing that you can do for an interview is gain the trust of your guest, right? And get them comfortable, get them speaking, be honest. What this guy did is he never told, like some people, he never told his real name.
Yeah.
One of the people that were he contacted in the aquaculture industry, and in the movie said that he didn't want to do an interview. He contacted him under a different name. So he told him a different name that he was going to interview him. So when the guy looked him up, he actually said this on Twitter, I looked your name up. I couldn't find you. So I refused the interview because I didn't know who you were. And so you tried to contact me under false pretenses. And now I know why, looking at the movie and looking what you tried to do to the aquaculture industry. Right. And so he went about and did the same thing to everybody else. Now, what you have to realize, just like in business, marine conservation is the same thing. You have to niche down, right? I think Americans, you guys say niche. You have to niche down, right? And so you have to have a specialty. And when you look at marine conservation, there are so many things that are affecting the ocean. We have overfishing, which is a big deal. Climate change, which is an even bigger deal, but those together make it a worse deal. Yeah. Plastic pollution, water pollution. You have all these things that play together to make something even worse. So every organization have their own specialties. So the Plastic Pollution Coalition, who he interviewed the two co-founders, Deanna Cohen, who is one of the co-founders. She was the second person they interviewed. And then the other person, I think her first name was Julie. I forget her name. I've actually interviewed Deanna Cohen, and they do great work. They work with plastics, not plastic fishing gear, but plastics from land-based sources.
Yeah.
Right. Which they actually quoted the wrong statistic. They were quoting something from like a 1980s paper saying that 80% of the plastic pollution in the ocean is fishing gear. There's a lot of fishing gear that's in the ocean, not denying that. And it's a huge problem. It is not more than land-based plastic pollution.
I know that you mentioned, was it like ghost nets that you said that some of them like have GPS? Like, can you
so I'll explain what happens. Essentially, when fishing gear gets used, sometimes it will disappear. So sometimes they lose the gear. And so we call those, and it'll continue to float. So if you think about some of the gear, you have things like gill nets. Gill nets are essentially, it's literally a net. So if you think about a grid, right? And that's a net. So there's just these little squares and they're all like different types of fishing. It's like a fishing line and it's a wall, but the wall is like kilometers long, right? So some of these can be up to 12 square kilometers or 20 square kilometers. It all depends on what type of gear and what they're fishing. And essentially what happens is they're supported by a buoy at the top. So on each side, they're supported by a buoy. And then it's just this big rectangle that floats in the water column. Okay. So from the surface all the way down, and it can go to depths of like 50 meters, so times 3, you're looking at over 150 feet. Wow. And so that's just a wall that catches anything. So they call it gill nets because fish will get their gills stuck in the net and then they get stuck there and they eventually die. But in that process, you can catch marine mammals, So dolphins, whales, porpoises, seals often get caught. Sea turtles often get caught. And what happens with those animals, they're air breathers. So when they get caught, they can't get to the surface to breathe air. And so eventually they'll drown and die. So a lot of bycatch from these nets will happen on a regular basis, even when they pull up, the net. But if they lose the net or they throw the net overboard because it rips somehow, they become these floating, and we call them ghost nets, because they don't belong to anybody. And there's no way of really tracking who let it go or who lost it. Whether they meant it
to punish anyone. It's not able to. I mean, it's potentially like anything we misplace in the ocean. You go out to the ocean and you lose your ring and you're never seeing it again. So there is a big problem when it comes to these nets, but at the same time, I mean, who is there to, limit the amount of things that they throw into the ocean?
Exactly. Or even just lose by accident. You just never know. And so what happens is they continue to catch fish and catch marine mammals and catch sharks and catch endangered species like sea turtles and so forth. And nobody's there to pull the net out until it washes ashore and you see all these dead animals. So it is a problem. It is a real problem. But when they talked about the percentage, they were like, oh, it's 46% is found in the Pacific the Pacific garbage patch is what they call it. It's the gyre system. So essentially what happens is there are 5 gyre systems, and a gyre system is a circulation of the ocean. One is in the middle of the Pacific, and essentially it's this big, you can almost think of it as a big wheel. And so that when the water gets to that point, it just goes in a big circle, and eventually it'll sort of kind of pinch off and go in different places. But that's a gyre system. So you would think with anything, it's almost like a toilet bowl. As the water circles, it starts to gain everything that's in there, and then it'll go down a hole, except it doesn't go down a hole, but it starts to circulate and it starts to collect all the items. So when they talk about the Pacific garbage patch, any kind of marine debris. So that could be, we've seen water bottles, we've seen lighters, we've seen large like containers, and you'd be surprised. I think one time somebody said they had like a shopping cart or something in there, and so like there's everything in there. It's just ridiculous. Yeah, it's just ridiculous. But a lot of it's microplastics. So that means when plastic is, say a water bottle gets into the ocean from a river system or so forth, it will break down eventually. So the sun and the seawater will break it down, and it'll break it down into these smaller particles. This is where it gets really dangerous. One, it's hard to collect. You can't collect. It's like a soup in the ocean. And the other part is that it becomes even more toxic. So because what happens is the toxins that are in the plastic that make up the plastic. So plastic is a petroleum product that there's a lot of metals in and everything like that. And so when that starts to break down, all those metals get into the water. And so when it gets into a fish or it gets into a whale or it gets into any kind of animal in the ocean, it'll just hold there. And then when it gets broken down somehow, all those toxins go into the body. And so like you'll see a lot of orcas on the West Coast just wash up to shore, and they'll have all these plastics in them, but a lot of the plastics that have broken down could cause their death or could cause them to get sick. And so it's very difficult to understand how a whale died when there's a lot of plastic in it. Sometimes it's asphyxiation. Yeah. So sometimes they choke on it, or they get caught in fishing net or something like that. But these microplastics are really bad for them as well. So there's all these different types of plastics, and there's fishing gear. Now imagine like an organization like Plastic Pollution Coalition, which is essentially an organization made up of hundreds of other organizations and individuals. Right. So people sign up being like, I'm going to work on plastics. I'm an organization that works on plastics, but I'm going to be part of this coalition to work together on policies to make sure that we refuse plastics, we reduce plastics in our everyday lives, making sure that, cities along the West Coast, they're really big along the West Coast, but all over the US and worldwide, that they stop putting plastic in their garbage and make sure there's recycling programs when necessary, or even refusing to sell certain types of plastics like garbage bags or like grocery bags and plastics grocery bags and so forth. Straws are
guys. Let's say the
a big thing. Yeah. And so when Ali, like the filmmaker, comes and questions them, he's like, well, it's the fishing nets that's the problem. It's only the fishing nets. Why aren't the fishing nets on your website? Why aren't you talking about that? That's not their niche. Their niche is land-based sources. And so when you ask somebody that, That's like asking a hunting organization, why aren't you doing anything about AR-15s being sold and kids using it to kill people in schools? It's completely separate, right? You can't, it's not related.
Yeah.
It just,
and he made it.
One thing doesn't have to do with the other one. Like, that's exactly what you're saying.
And he made it such a big deal. Like, he wanted for everyone. Like, that's one of the things that, like, honestly, like, that caught my attention. I was like, what? Like, wait, what? And then I searched it up and I was like, oh my gosh, like, it's true. There is such a big thing when it comes to, like, nets. And like you just said it yourself, like these ghost nets as well. Yep. But it's true. Like, and he was attacking them. Like, he was literally attacking those ladies because he was like, well, why aren't you talking about this? And like, even the girl was like, like, whoa.
Yeah, she even said it. Deanna said, this is not in my wheelhouse. She says, I'm not an expert in this. We do not cover this. And then she goes, turn off the cameras, because she realized what was happening. Turn off the cameras. And he showed that. Now, from that, everybody's like, oh, well, that's not a big deal. Like, that's not a huge deal. They'll be okay. They're getting death threats. They got death threats. Like, they had to turn off all the comments on their social media. They had to stop everything. People were pulling their funding. This is an organization that does great work. And he's pitting these organizations against each other. He's pitting people who have been made aware of this stuff against these organizations who are actually doing a good job. And they don't have big budgets. They're not the corporations. They're not companies. They're a nonprofit organization. Right? And so this is what frustrates myself and my colleagues and my friends, is the fact that they're going after these people and they're not the real culprits. They're not the real culprits. You want to go after the culprits, you go after the big corporations.
I feel like some people are just trying to look for someone to hate. Yep. And to someone, I mean, as human beings, at the end of the day, it's never my fault. It's never my fault. It's always, it's because I was taught this, or it's because, this big corporation, it's always the money. And honestly, in certain situations, it is all about money. And, you just stop thinking about everything else that's going on and how it is affecting the world. Obviously, we understand that climate change is a thing, and we understand that the fishing industry, could be doing better. And we also understand that plastic is a really big thing in the ocean. We have all of these, animal life and wildlife that are dying from it, just like you said it. But
hundreds of thousands a year estimated.
I feel like this movie was merely made to hate. Like, it was just that, and it inspires you to hate. And something that I really took from some of your episodes that I was listening to was how you brought to light that, it's not all bad. Like, yes, the fishing industry, could do a couple of things better to, limit the amount of fish that they're bringing in, and, the methods that they're using, and the waste that they're leaving into the ocean, et cetera, et cetera. But, there are people doing something about it. Like, it's not all bad. It's not just like, everyone completely forgot that, they're killing millions of fish a month or a year.
Every day.
Yeah.
It's crazy the numbers that you hear, and it's worrying, but at the same time, they just are nurturing people to hate. They're just, just wanting people to be like, no, you know what, Andrew, you're a biologist and you're not doing anything about it. So you know what, you should be canceled too. And I honestly think it has a lot to do with the whole cancel culture that's going on right now.
For sure.
Like, it's just, you're not doing everything completely, sustainable and completely, animal free, and completely, like, you deserve to be canceled. And I feel like it's okay to call out people in their mistakes, but at the same time, we cannot judge someone for trying to change. And something that I didn't appreciate about the whole documentary was what you were saying, how he was attacking these people, how he was literally like wanting to make them look and feel stupid about what they're doing. Because he said it. He's like, so you're saying that microplastics are, a big part of why the ocean is the way it is. But, you have all these fishing nets and they're over 50%. Don't you think that's the most that's affecting it? And then she was just like, I mean, to what you're saying, yeah, it is. But at the same time, no, like that's not even what I'm trying to do here. Like, Why was he attacking? It was just the same thing. It was just trying to attack and trying to keep hidden that, you know, he's not the first people that actually the first person that comes out with these questions and you know, tries to make a difference. And like you said, it was that white savior complex. And my question to you, Andrew, is what are a couple of things that we can, you know, tell our listeners that, you know, people are doing and people are trying to make a positive impact and people are trying, you know, to fight. They mentioned piracy at a point in the documentary, and they mentioned honestly, I feel like the big enemy in this documentary was Asia. At the end of the day, it was, you know,
I mean, because of everything that they were doing, like to the dolphins and the sharks. I guess the question would be like, where do we go like from here? Like, what do we do now? Like, because the topic is like super hot right now. And like, like the movie itself had like, it was like we all said, you know, and agreed on, it wasn't the truth. It wasn't the truth. But now that the topic is so hot, like, what is it that we can do? Because like we said, we honestly did not know about this. So now that we actually do, like where I heard you say it, where you said it on your podcast, it was like these newly inspired, like to the community, you know, like, so what do we do now? Like, what should we do?
Yeah. And this is, you know, what I wanted to focus on too, because like the movie's one thing and it's already done. You know, the damage that's done, they will recoup. These organizations like Oceana and Plastic Pollution Coalition, the dolphin label, the dolphin safe tuna. And I did do a whole podcast on how that dolphin safe label has actually decreased the amount of dolphins that have died in the US. Other places, not so much because it hasn't been used in other places. But it has done some good. I think what people have to do is they have to come in with a bit of a realistic perspective. Overfishing is a real thing. It's something that we have to understand. There are a lot of problems. We've talked a lot about it. And the one thing that I commend Seaspiracy for trying to do is cover as many themes as possible. I think in doing that, they may have confused and overwhelmed a lot of people in terms of, you know, what to do. And so there are a number of things that you can do personally. So the first thing is you could stop eating seafood. If you have that choice and you are able to do that and you choose to do that, you can stop eating seafood. I don't have a problem with that. If that's your choice, you can do that. For those of you who want to eat seafood, know how the seafood is caught. Okay, so there are a bunch of apps out there. In the US, there's a great app, and actually you can use it all over the world. It's called the Seafood Watch app, and it's by Monterey Bay. And what it'll do is it'll actually really enlighten you to how fish are caught, which fish are caught the right way, and when I say the right way is it's safe. It's not, you know, other fish aren't caught. Like there's no bycatch, which means other non-targeted fish are caught with it. They're used in safe ways. They don't catch endangered species, things like that. So it'll actually have a list of items, and it'll say which tuna to buy, you know, which snapper to get. You know, should you get snapper? And it'll go through a whole bunch of things. And what they're doing is you have scientists behind the scenes who are pouring through so much data on fish stocks and everything to find out whether these things are really good to have. So it arms the consumer. It arms the person who's going to buy that fish with the knowledge of what to get. Now, with that said, you could have all that knowledge and you can go to your grocery store, like say like Publix, and you can go behind that counter, and there could be a kid who's like 16 years old who's serving you that seafood, and you can ask him, "How was my fish caught?" I don't know, because they're not telling him, right? And so in those situations,
like I got it from the box.
Exactly, they just gave it to me to lay out and put it on ice. But you know, when people don't know that, that's when you say, "I'm not going to buy from you because you don't know how it was caught." That is a powerful tool to use. Now you have to sacrifice your willingness to get that seafood, but it's a powerful choice to say, I need to know how this was caught. I need to know where it comes from, because that's the real problem with eating seafood is not knowing who's catching it and how it was caught and where it's coming from. So there are fish that come into the US, that come into Canada, that go into Europe, that are coming from these boats that use fishery slaves. But how are you supposed to know that? There's probably a good chance that all three of us have bought seafood at one point in time, or our families have, or our friends who have contributed to that industry, because you just don't know.
I'm pretty sure.
I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
I'm like 100% sure that I have been a part of it.
Right. And you just don't know. And like the now that you know, you can say, all right, I'm going to make a stand. I'm going to make a stand. I'm only going to buy fish that's locally caught in the US or in Canada or like in North America, say, right? Because any kind of food choice, local is better. Yeah. Right. So
always.
Right. Yeah. So, Marlene, you say you live about 5.5 hours from the coast. So that's the local to you is that coast, like in the Gulf of Mexico. So look up in the Gulf of Mexico what the seafood's like, what's sustainable, what's not, what's available, what's not. Right. Because some of the sustainable options aren't available in your grocery store.
Yeah.
Or in your fisheries market or something else. So that's your choice to make is, do I know where this is coming from? Now, with that said, there are a lot of new businesses that are popping up, and they're called community supported fisheries. And essentially what it is, and sometimes they're doing it online. They have a bunch in Canada. There's some in Alaska, and I know there's some along the coastlines of the US. It essentially is a marketing company gets in touch with a fishing community, and they say, hey, we're going to support each fishery family on their own. So in BC, there's a company called Skipper Auto, and you basically go onto this site, you become a member, so you pay a membership fee, and then you basically choose the fish that you want. They're going to go out and they're going to fish and they're going to get that fish. And then they're going to come back out. Right. And they're going to come back out. They're going to send it to you fresh. And then they're going to send you a whole like pamphlet or an email with the fisher who caught it. So the family, the boat they use, what they hook, like what hooks they use, what kind of gear they use. And for them, like for the fisher, you got to remember when fishermen go out to a boat and they don't know who they're selling to or how much they're going to make, they have to pay for a crew. They have to pay for the diesel to go out, right? And they're going to pay for as much as they can in hopes that they can make as much as they can. That means their incentive is they have to fish as many fish as possible that their boat can hold and their quota allows. Then they're going to come back and they're going to hope at that time that they come back that fish is going to be as expensive as possible that they can sell and make their money, not only just make their money back, but make a little bit of profit. But in this situation, it empowers the fisher to be like, I know what crew I need, how many people, I know how much fuel I need to use because I know exactly where I need to catch this fish, right? And you have the power to choose which fish you want. It's wild caught, it's sustainable, how it's caught, who it's caught to, and there's no middle people.
Yeah.
Right. But the problem with these types of companies is you're going to pay more for it. Yeah. Right. So you have to be prepared and you have to be in that sort of bracket to be able to pay more for a more expensive fish that's better.
It goes back to being like privileged, like how you're privileged.
Exactly. Right. And that's the thing. And that's what it comes back to, like, the being vegan and, having the privilege of paying more for a salad and paying more because, I'm going to my farmer's market and I'm getting my eggs fresh and et cetera, et cetera. And at the end of the day, it's just having the money to be able to do it. Because, you have to pay a membership. And even though this is such an amazing idea, and I think that's so cool, and I had no idea that was going on. At the end of the day, it has to do with, the people that are able to pay for it. Exactly. So at the end of the day, it is still a problem, because our economy is, well,
especially during a pandemic, right? Especially during a pandemic, it gets even worse. Yeah.
Yeah. Sure. No. So I feel like we're all suffering and we all try to go for the easy route. And honestly, our easy route is getting cans of tuna for 50 cents or 60 cents. In our local grocery store. And because obviously another thing that's going down through the pandemic is everyone wants to be living a fit life. Everyone, doesn't want to be getting that chubby and all of this stuff. So what do is that they go for fish. Yeah. And honestly, I was a victim of it. I used to live with my roommate and we would be like, let's just eat tuna, it's healthier. But then, and I feel like that's why, I felt so bad about it because I was like, oh my God, like I didn't even check for dolphin safe tuna. That wasn't because even you didn't know about it. I had no idea. I had no idea that this was going on. Yeah. And even though it makes so much sense to me now that I know about it, whenever, and there's the thing that I always say, ignorance is bliss. Like you just don't feel, guilty about it because you don't know this is going on. But at the same time, I honestly wish I knew sooner. I wish I was aware of this sooner so I could have shared it with more people. And so I could have, been someone that would be an activist for this type of stuff. And it's just, I've always been a huge fan of the ocean. I've always respected it, enormously, because I think it's so beautiful and it has so many secrets and it has so much, life in it and so much we don't know about it, et cetera, et cetera. And it honestly breaks my heart knowing that some people are destroying it out of just because they want profit.
Yeah,
it's just because they want profit. And of course, I know, they have their own family, have their own problems, they have their own need for money, et cetera, et cetera. So it comes down to, let's just, commit to making a change to what I can do. In this situation, I can't go out in the boats and, check for slaves and, do what the this other lady did, which I wish I was that brave, but it's not happening right now in Texas.
Me too.
But we can start by this. We can start by doing this. We can start by donating to different organizations that do it. I always had the dream of going out and helping rebuild the ocean and all of these different plants that we have in the ocean that they also mention in Seaspiracy for like 5 minutes and then it's over. And I feel like the documentary had started with the right intention and then just did not live up to what it wanted to do.
I completely agree. And I think all these documentaries have, a purpose. This purpose was to get more people to eat vegan. Even on their website, they have plans that you can buy vegan plants. They literally, that was their purpose, and they're going to make money off it, which is fine. If they want to make money off, it's fine. What I don't appreciate, throwing people under the bus that didn't need to be thrown under the bus, going after the wrong people. If you want to go after the corporations who are responsible for like the tuna industry, Mitsubishi is a corporation that will buy tuna and store it, freeze it for like 25 years in hopes that when tuna goes extinct, they can sell it for a huge price. Like, you got to remember, a tuna that's like 700 pounds can go for over $1 million on the market.
Wow.
Right? So imagine when they're extinct, how much money you can get for it. Right? And that's what they're hoping for. And that's what they're going for. And a great documentary that I would highly recommend. Unfortunately, it's not freely available like on Netflix or available on the internet, but you can get it. It's End of the Line is a movie that is fantastic. And I highly recommend watching it. It was put out in 2009, so it's not that far off. And what it really goes to, and this is sort of like my next call to action, and Marlene, you kind of mentioned it, like taking that next step, is looking at the policies that have either helped or not helped the fishing industry. Like the one thing that really shows a success story is in the US, there are a number of policies that have been put into place that brought back populations of animals. So it starts off with there's a fisheries policy, and the name is escaping me right now. It's two people's names, and I can't think of it. Anyway, it came into power in the 70s. And what that fisheries, it really put up like quotas. It enforced quotas. It enforced like an ecosystem-based management approach. It looked at like the whole ecosystem, like the whole food web, and how we need to make sure that we don't interrupt the food web. And that policy brought back the anchovies and the sardines on the West Coast. Okay, let's use that as an example. Well, also at that time, the sea lions in the 60s were being hunted to extinction. So they put in a Marine Mammal Protection Act in the 70s. That means no marine mammal, including seals, including whales, including dolphins, can be harassed, can be harmed. Like when you go out in waters, you cannot touch a marine mammal. You can't touch a dolphin, can't touch a seal. Like that's against the law for a reason. So now you can't hunt these animals without specific permissions. So that brought the sea lion population back. Well, when you bring the sea lion population back, there was the endangered great white shark along the West Coast. It was disappearing because people were hunting it. People didn't understand it. They saw it as a killing machine. Jaws came out, it became worse. What scientists
The
started
worst
to
movie
do.
in the world.
Yeah,
I
Right.
fucking hate Jaws. I hate it. But that was its purpose. It was
Funny story, though. I was actually talking to a shark scientist who was around in the 70s who said that when Jaws came out, they actually got more money for great white shark research because politicians wanted to know what it was all about. And along the Southern California shores, there's a great white shark nursery area, meaning like there's juveniles that kind of hang out there. That's why it's such a popular spot for great whites, and because the sea lion population came back. So the great white shark population has come back to such a level that now they're moving north, because there's no room for competition and stuff. So these policies have actually brought back these species, and the great white shark was also protected by the Endangered Species Act. So policies in the US, when they're enforced properly, when they're managed properly, they work. And so when you have, each country has their own, they call it exclusive economic zone, right? EEZ. And essentially what that is 200 nautical miles out from the coastline. That is, like, say in the US, that's their federal jurisdiction. Okay. So they handle and manage all the waters in there. Nobody can fish in there without their permission. Like, other countries can't come down without their permission and so forth. But they handle all those boundaries. So in that 200 nautical mile, there are some fisheries in the US that have been very well managed, and they're sustainable. They're fished, but they're sustainable. And they have other tools like marine protected areas that we can go on, but we probably don't have the time to go into all the tools that are used. But these policies work. And when they're implemented and they're enforced properly, they work. And that's, they use every ocean user. So they bring in indigenous people, they bring in the fisheries community, they bring the oil and gas community, any ocean user, kayakers, surfers, all the people that use the ocean, they bring them together and they agree on certain policies, implementation, protected areas, and so forth. And it works. Now, when we're talking about international waters, that's an entire different story. And that's where we've seen problems. We've seen ships that have been chased for 20 years and not caught. They change their names. They change where they're registered, what countries they're registered in. They do illegal fishing. So there's one thing to look at if you want to. So if you want to look at the policies, you go to organizations like Ocean Conservancy, Oceana. They're the ones who are working with governments to put those policies into place to reduce subsidies for certain fisheries that are not sustainable and making sure that those fisheries are sustainable. Those are the people who work. Not only do they have scientists, but they have like policymakers that really enforce those. And that's, if you want to volunteer with those organizations or support them with the donations, those are the organizations that will really do some good, that will move the needle in the US and beyond. But when it comes down to a lot of other places, it's so difficult, because it's like when you have these international boats that can't be caught, and when they do get caught, like for instance, this one boat that was chased for 20 years got caught in Indonesia. Indonesia take a special approach to illegal fishers. They sink them. They use their navy and they shoot them down. Oh yeah. Yeah, with torpedoes, with missiles, they will bring them down. So a lot of like Chinese ships, their distant fleet are notorious for fishing in illegal waters. And so if they come to Indonesia, they'll actually they'll sink the boats and they'll bring the people on, put them in jail. This boat, they finally, they went to Indonesia, tried to fish, and the Navy took it down. Didn't sink it, but basically took it over. And now use it in their fleet to stop illegal fishing. So there are some countries that are really taking a fast approach, but they're protecting their own people. Now, whether I agree with that or not, I don't agree with any kind of violence to do that kind of stuff. But it works. It detracts a lot of people from coming in and fishing illegally, which you find. But when that boat got caught and they looked at who the owners were, it was a web of organized crime, different politicians, corruption, and they couldn't even untangle it to the point of actually charging somebody. And that's, so when I talk about in Seaspiracy, they go after the wrong people. They are literally going after the wrong people. They are going after easy targets, what we call the low-hanging fruit. This is easy to blame an organization that works with plastic. They're not doing anything about fisheries. Notice how they never talked to anybody that did go after ghost nets. Tracey, you mentioned earlier the study that I mentioned in my podcast about there's an organization that's putting GPS trackers on these nets. So if they do get lost, you can go find them. You can go pick them up. And they went out and they picked up like 40 tons of fishing nets one time. That's a huge conservation win. And that's going to be implemented soon, in certain countries. And maybe that'll be something that we're going to see in the future. And we can grab a lot of those, even if we get, 10 or 20% back, that's a huge win.
That's a huge thing. And obviously we always work. I mean, we always work to get it, to get more. And it just has to start somewhere. And that's where with this documentary, it just focuses on all the negative things. It focuses on all, like every single place where we are lacking to do something, which in my opinion is not completely bad, but I completely agree with you, Andrew, where you mentioned that they should have, put a little bit of the positivity or mention what,
what
these
we
campaigns
can do.
Yeah. And how all of these different, nonprofits, they're not mentioning this on their page, and it's because, they have an association to this other one, and that's why they're getting paid. And, hurt them in their pockets at the end of the day. Sadly, that's when people change or, organizations change, etc. But also, mention the good stuff. Mention that even though, they're not focused on fishing nets and etc., they're still, helping getting all this plastic out. And even though, they use a hashtag and they want to do it for marketing and whatever, the reasons behind it is, truth is, they have been doing a lot of good. They have been taking a lot of plastic out, and they have been, making people making people be aware that, plastic bags are not the greatest thing. And, we need to be a little bit more careful with our trash, and we need to try reusing things and making sure that you recycle, and making sure, all of these different things that we hear in oh my God, it's because you're so hipster, because you always have your water bottle everywhere and you always use reusable. My it's so funny because I always mock my mom about it. She bought these reusable wooden cutlery, right?
Yes.
And in parties, and she's always like, I have my cutlery.
Awesome.
And we're always and it's so funny to me, just because, I love my mom. And honestly, it's a Mexican thing. We always mock each other for the stupidest shit. But she's always like, I have my cutlery, and she just brings out like this big box of like, wooden cutlery.
Yeah.
And everyone is always like, my mom's so hipster because, she has her cutlery and et cetera, et cetera. And she's doing an amazing thing for the ocean. And obviously that's why I love her so much and all of this stuff. But, in a way it's taken as a joke too. Like, you want to do this stuff. You want to stop using, your straws, and you want to save the turtles, and you want to share these videos of all these animals being hurt. And, you want to do, put your little grain into it and start making people aware of it. And sometimes even taken as a joke. And that's why I feel like some people are also like, oh, climate change isn't a thing, and it's,
it is a
and
thing.
like,
and
we are all completely aware that it is a thing, and you can just feel it in the weather. It's not even summer yet, and I kid you not, in Texas we're at 100 plus Fahrenheit, and we're still in spring. Like, there's no way that you're gonna come and tell me that's climate change is not a thing.
Well, when the entire west coast of North America goes up in flames, there's a problem. Every year for longer.
Every year, like clockwork.
Right. But I think, it's really interesting. First of all, congratulations to your mom. I'm very proud of her for what she's doing.
Shout out to Mom Marlene.
But an interesting story. So we talked about a little bit about the straws, and I assume you've seen the video of the straw in the sea turtle's nose, right?
Yes.
A lot of people have seen that. So I interviewed the guy. He's actually a good friend of mine who actually pulled out that straw from that sea turtle. He's a sea turtle researcher that was working in Costa Rica at the time. And I remember when I interviewed him, I asked him, I said, what are the odds like that a sea turtle will get a straw stuck in its nose? And he was like, I don't know, man, I've never seen it before. So like 1,000,000 to 1, like maybe more. And I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. And then 4 months later, he sends me a video. And about 70 kilometers down the beach, same type of turtle, olive ridley turtle. There's a big nesting season, and they all come up. Like 200 turtles come up to nest on this one beach, and it's a big tourist attraction. Not allowed to touch the turtles, but you can walk through and you can see all these different turtles. One tourist was like, "Hey, he saw this, they tapped him on the shoulder because he was doing some science work, and they were like, hey, you got to come see the sea turtle, there's something wrong with it, and it was bleeding out of its nose. And he went to go see it, and he's like, oh my God, there's something stuck. So this time he's like, before, when something was stuck, he thought it was like a coral or like a piece of algae or something like that was stuck. Now he's like, that's something hard that's stuck. He pulled it out, and it wasn't a straw, it was a plastic fork. And it like popped open, so imagine having a plastic, a fork stuck in your navel cavity.
Oh my God.
Right? For however long, and so this is not just a one-time thing. This is something that happens. And one of the things we talked about, like personal choice, especially with like seafood, but another personal choice is it's kind of like a newish term, but it's like going zero waste, like a zero waste lifestyle. And what that means is it means carrying around your own wooden cutlery or bamboo cutlery, carrying around your own straws, carrying around your water bottle. Just those are the basic things that you can do. They're not expensive. I think a metal straw now goes for like $1. It's like, it's really cheap to get it, and you can get it and you can reuse it over and over again. So having that is even better. But I actually had somebody on my podcast the other day that talked about zero waste, because I'm always interested in how we can go zero waste. And it's like, you look around your household and think about how you wash dishes. You use liquid soap, and it's in a plastic container, right? And so I was talking to this woman, and she was like, yeah, at the zero waste stores, you can get, it's like a bar soap, but it's dish detergent. So all you're doing is scrubbing it on your dishes. There's no container for it. So think about, you're already eliminating one container in your household, like plus a dish soap. Sponge. Plus the sponge, which is like, usually it's on a plastic thing, like, because you have that little hard sponge, right? Or you have a separate plastic thing that actually just scrubs everything down, maybe not with the soap. And so you're just eliminating like 2 or 3 things just off of that routine, and think about how many things around your house you can eliminate by going to a zero waste store. All the containers you get with everything that you buy, in terms of just thinking of like groceries and like something you put in your pantry. All these things can really help. Storing things in mason jars instead of actually having like plastic bottles. Like when you go to these zero waste stores, which you probably have in Texas, you just don't know about it because they're probably like mom and pop shops.
Yeah, I was like, where? I was about to search it up.
Honestly,
Google.
there's this big grocery store here in Texas that's called HEB. So it's literally HEB. And when I used to live in San Antonio, which is a little bit, more of a bigger city than where I'm currently in, they had a section that did not say zero waste, but you had on a wall like all of these different, types of nuts or, chia seeds or, salt and like all of these different things where you could go with your container, whatever you wanted to do, and you could fill it up, and then, you put on there, I got whatever, and then they go weigh it, and then they charge you. So it is a thing, but we were not, brought up with it. It was never and you know what, don't use that much. Honestly, whenever I was younger, I don't even remember anyone telling me don't use plastic bags. Like it was just, how many plastic bags can you carry in your arms, and, take all the groceries inside. And now that you get older, bag it.
They'll double bag it.
They double bag it. You're like, no.
They'll be like, that milk is not falling on you. I'm going to put triple bag on that.
Exactly.
And then you get home and you have all these bags and you have nothing, like no idea what to do with them.
Exactly. And you can't recycle them, or you can't. Sometimes you can bring them back to the grocery store. Sometimes you can't. And that's where it comes down to is if you start thinking about those things and almost think less is better, like in terms of think about containers that you have around your house. Think about stuff that you normally do that, 5 years ago when we went to a restaurant before a pandemic and we could go to restaurants, we would be able to, we would get a drink and a straw would be in it. We wouldn't even question it, including myself.
Yeah,
we wouldn't even question it until the straw campaign came out. Now we're like, no, thank you. Like you had to go out of your way to say no for a straw because they would automatically bring it. And I can't tell you the arguments I had with waiters or waitresses who would be like, I don't understand. Why don't you just want a straw? I'm like, because you have a dishwasher, right? You put these through the dishwasher. Yeah. It's hot water, right? So there's not going to be germs. No. Yeah, you're fine. Then I don't need a straw. Now some people do need a straw. Some people who have some sort
certain
of
medical condition,
and they need it, and that's fine. I'm not saying that everybody doesn't need it. It's most of the population that doesn't need it. Though, if we can reduce that amount, think about like 90%, we are living large, and like even going to like Starbucks, and or any kind of coffee shop that you prefer. And bringing your own container, because they used to offer that before pandemic. Obviously, we're in a different time now, but hopefully they'll bring that back. Things like that, but also bring it and ask the people. And the more people that ask the stores, can you fill my bottle up, or can you do this? The more they start to think about it, and eventually somebody will start to question it, and somebody will start to change. So the more you discuss it, the more you talk about it. It's very hard to change our behavior. We are not used to change. We don't do well with change. But when we start to really think about it, the best thing to do is learn, and then start to implement that learning.
Yes.
Be that person like your mom who could take a bit of a joke, take a bit of razzing, and be like, and take pride in it.
Mm-hmm.
Be like, I could have saved 5 sea turtles just by bringing a wooden fork.
Yep.
Oh yeah, and she's very proud of it. Like, she's super proud of it, just because she loves turtles. Like, she literally like loves turtles. She always sees. It's super funny because on Facebook, all those like marketplace and like stuff like that, where you can just buy stuff from your neighbors or people close by, whatever. She once saw some people that were going to move out of town and they couldn't take their turtles, and she was like, I remember just coming home from work and I just had this huge fish tank in the middle of my living room. And, I was like, Mom, what? And then she's like, and because, she's Mexican and she talks in Spanish, and she's like, oh my God, mija, they were giving away these turtles for free. And then I was like, and why do we have turtles now? And then she was just like, I just couldn't leave them. I couldn't leave them. She's like, so, we had that space in the living room that needed something. I was like, Mom, but you don't go and get turtles. So she ended up naming them Dixie and Pixie. And she was crazy about her turtles. And I, a little background on me, I have 3 dogs and I have a cat. So we're huge, on animals, and we're, huge animal lovers. And we always try to foster and help as many dogs and cats, out. And, we always try to make our part to try to help as much as we can. And, my mom rescues all type of animals. I remember they were giving out some birds. And so there was a point in my house where I had 2 of everything. I had 2 birds, I had 2 fish, I had 2 turtles, I had 2 dogs, I had 2 cats. It was super funny. And my mom would always be like, it's because you never know. Like, I'm building, Noah's Ark. Like, and I was like, oh my God. And it was so hilarious. And she used it, as a joke, but, in her own way, like, she's trying to save these animals. And we did end up releasing them into this lake that was, close by and stuff like that. So, they're living their free life out there. But she's very proud of it. And that's why, I want to get into it. And that's why we want to talk about it. And that's why Tracey and I, in a live that we did not too long ago, I think it was like 2 weeks ago, it just came up. I don't even remember how it came up. I think someone asked us a question, on a live, and we were just like, oh my God, and this new, documentary about Seaspiracy, and we need to talk about it, and et cetera, et cetera. So we started looking into it, and that's when we decided to reach out to you, and we're like, we need to, talk about the myths. We need to talk about what we actually can do as a city person, because, if we lived in the country, or we lived where we can, talk to all of these fishermen and stuff like that, it would be completely different. But even though you're not close to a beach, everyone else that's out there, you can still do something. We can still make a change, and we can still, like you said, try to go zero waste, because again,
don't do it all at once. Don't expect to do it all at once. Do it slowly. Do what you can. Like I said, changing your behavior is very difficult. I mean, even like, think about it. Like, I go on eating cuts and diets and all that kind of stuff all the time. It's not an easy process. You have to take it one day at a time. It's a change in lifestyle. It's a change in habits. And it's the same thing. Just think about it though. Like, you live in a place where you mentioned that the only thing that goes through is a river. That river ends up in the ocean.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if you live in the Midwest. It doesn't matter if you live on the coast. Eventually, whatever you put in that water or whatever ends up in that water will get to an ocean. Whether it goes through rivers and lakes, it'll eventually get to that ocean. So we're all connected to the ocean no matter where we live. And the biggest thing is to start slow. Just think, even just to think in your daily life, what you do, walking down the street, what could I do to live for a better ocean?
Yeah.
Live for a better environment. And that's where you start to really open your eyes to be like, okay, like if you see trash and it's safe to pick up, pick it up.
Pick it up.
Like when you, Tracey, I don't know if you have any animals, Marlene, you mentioned you have dogs. When you're taking the dogs for a walk, bring a bag, bring some gloves, and pick up. If you see something that's trash, pick it up. Because for me in my neighborhood, I have like a closed off neighborhood and we're all kind of close knit and a good community here. I don't want to see trash in my neighborhood. I take pride in my neighborhood. So if I'm walking around my neighborhood, it doesn't matter if it's on the lawn or of my neighbors or something. I'm going to go pick it up, put it in my bag, and I'm going to go put it away where it's supposed to go. Right. And so looking at that type of thing, refusing plastics, is the biggest thing in the grocery store. If you forget your reusable bag or some kind of container, I take it individually to my car. And I will put it individually in my car and then take it out individually in my car. It's my punishment for not bringing my bags or my crates that I have.
I'm going to start doing that.
Yeah.
Just do that.
I'll literally be like, oh, okay, next time. But
exactly.
I need to punish myself.
There was a time when we wouldn't every single store was not allowed to use plastic bags. And that only lasted maybe a
lot
year.
Of people complain, probably.
And
I feel like
and now it's bad.
It lasted at least 2 or 3 years, but then it
was a lot shorter.
There was I don't know, some retard in Texas was like, nah, you know what, plastic bags are a thing again. And at first people were crazy about it. They were like, no, that's why we got all these reusable bags and don't use plastic bags. And there was this campaign going on, and then people just forgot. It was just like, nah, and plastic bags are a thing again. So
yeah, and this is one thing again about what you can do, is vote for candidates. I'm going to say it doesn't matter Republican or Democrat, conservative, liberal. There are always people on both sides of the aisle that are going to be for the environment. And you'd be surprised sometimes, when your last president, I'm not going to name his name, not a big fan of him, when he wanted to close off some of the parks or open some of the parks up to mining. And one of I think it was Mark Rubio, came out and was like, yeah, I kind of support this. Well, all of his hunter and fisher organizations that he supported and that supported him complained to him, being like, no, we want our parks to be the same. Yes, we hunt and we fish, but we love being in nature.
Yeah.
So if you get a hunter, you get a fisher, they want nature. They love sitting out on a boat in the quiet. That's what they love to do. If you look at a hunter sits in peace and quiet for 16 hours a day. They don't make a noise, right? They sit in one little area and that's it.
And sometimes for days.
Yes.
And in super cold weather or in super hot weather.
Yeah. But they do it and they love being in nature, right? And so those organizations made Mark Rubio change his mind. And then there were certain parks that couldn't be opened up to mining because of his support. And he's a Republican. Which normally these days, for some reason, in these days, they're against the environment. Yeah. A lot of those policies that I talked about back in the day, those were the times when Nixon was president and we had Republican presidents and they were Republican policies back then. So look at the individual in your riding, look at who it is, ask them questions, have a conversation with them, or their supporters, and be like, what's your stance on the ocean? What's your stance on the environment? If they're really big into oil and gas, they're really big into like mining and stuff, ask them what their cleanup plans are. What are they? Ask them questions, or really question their party, question their campaign. And if they are not for the environment, do not vote them in.
Yeah.
If they deny climate change, they are not for the environment, do not vote them in. Like if that's what's important to you, do not vote them in.
Yeah.
Right? That's your power.
That is our power.
That away.
Yeah, it is. And that's
Right?
Literally, that's our power.
I do not want to get into right now because that's a whole 2 other hours of conversation. But yes, be active in your community. Pick up the garbage, guys. And this is something that my friends always mock me for. Always. And it's just as simple as the other day. I live in an apartment complex, right? So it's like a closed area, closed community, but it's still an apartment. And we went to the pool and we were cooking out, right? So, my friends weren't, throwing everything away, but, a little breeze would come out every once in a while, and you just drop that little plastic bag and all of this. And I would always come up to them and I was like, the only thing I'm going to tell you guys is do not litter. And they were like, Marlene, I don't know what.
Yeah.
And I took it as a joke at first. I was like, hey, I'm funny. Just do not litter. And then as, they started drinking more, and then it started getting darker, and I would walk through like the side and I would see like a plastic plate on the floor, and I would like, guys, like, I'm being serious about this. Like, do not litter. Like, do not. If you want a plate, you're going to carry that plate all night. And I do not care. Like, if you want to get into the pool, leave it under your cup and go into the pool and come back and get your motherfucking plate, because you're not littering. And they were like, oh my God, okay, fine. And then we ended up cleaning everything and everything was fine. But it's a thing. Like, don't feel like, oh my God, I'm gonna look so ridiculous if I just stop here and I just pick up all this garbage. Don't. I do not care how full of garbage you will have your car because you want to, not throw it out the window. Do not, like, don't wait, man. Just wait. Like, I'm pretty sure you are going to be in the side of a garbage can in 10 minutes. Just hold on.
I agree.
Just hold on to it. And if not, you can always have a little baggie in your car to keep garbage. That's it. Yep.
But these are important conversations to have with friends and family. You know what I mean? And these are the little things that count. And I don't think people think it counts, but if you convince just one person to do that, that's a win. Right? Because they're going to convince one person to do it, and that's going to just grow. It grows,
It does.
It grows.
It honestly does.
Yeah. And there's a lot of there's great organizations out there too. If people want to get into more activism and see what they want to do, Our Climate is a great organization. I can send you these links if you want to.
Yeah, go ahead and
send
them to us just so we can put it in the description of the episode. Yeah. And if you can go ahead and help us come up with a post that we can post next week, just naming some of these organizations and, encouraging people to go ahead and be active with it. Sadly, we are getting to the end of this podcast.
No problem.
Yes.
We would definitely love to have you on again to talk about, all the 3,000 different million things that we would like to talk about. Just, at the end of our episodes, we are trying to do this little new segment that is pretty much you talking to our listeners. So either a quote that has inspired you to make a change, or a quote that has inspired you to keep on going, or a way that you stay motivated, something that you believe could, inspire people to do more.
Yeah, for sure. Actually, one of my favorite people that got me into marine biology was Jacques Cousteau, and he says we protect what we love. And then it's really what it is. If we have pride in something, we will love it. And we've already talked about stories here with your mom loving turtles, loving animals. If you're around animals, or you watch shows on animals and you like that, you start to get pride. You start to feel pride. You feel pride in your community. Once you love it, you're going to want to protect it. And that's the key.
That's really awesome. Is the key. That is awesome.
I loved it.
Tracy's gonna start crying right now.
I just want to change the world.
I know we're getting there. We're doing it one step at a time. And I do want to say thank you, Andrew, for being on this episode with us today, talking about a very important subject. And we are always playing around and trying to be funny and, just trying to give it that like cool kind of air because we're so cool. But it is a very serious thing, and it is something that we feel passionate about. And even though, we're not doing too much for it right now, or we want to believe we're not doing too much for it right now, we are inspired and we are really, wanting to make that change. So thank you so much for coming on today and, giving us a little bit about your perspective and just talking about all of these different things that we can do to change and all of
sharing your knowledge with us.
Yeah, it's sharing your knowledge. That's it. I don't know if Tracey has something to tell you.
Honestly, no. I mean, thank you just for like everything you shared. Like it was, because like I said, I mean, the movie itself, it was something completely different. And when I was listening to your podcast, it was more about like, hey, like, no, like this is really what's going on. And if you really want to like change the world and like at least help. And now that you're so aware of it, and it has, like I said, it's such a hot topic right now. Like, thank you for like coming on and actually giving everybody like the background to it and to explain like what is really going on and what we can really do to better it, to change it.
Yep, no problem. This is something I love to do. It's something that I've dedicated my life to doing. Is talking to people about the ocean. And obviously, judging by the amount of time you've had me on here, you can tell that I love talking about the ocean. So no, I really do appreciate it.
I told you we could go on forever. So
literally,
that's why we could just make a documentary about it, just about us.
Make our own movie.
Well, no, but I love coming on podcasts like this because it's exposing another audience to maybe somebody that doesn't necessarily know about this and is able to find out a little bit more and do more research and maybe be inspired by this conversation. So I appreciate you allowing me to come on here and being able to talk about this kind of stuff. It means a lot.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for being so open to it. I do want to go ahead and just encourage everyone that is listening to us right now to make a change. I once had a friend come up to me and she was always telling me, why do you work so hard for it, Marlene? Like, it's not like one person is going to change the world. And I always tell her the same thing. And I always bring this up. I'm going to torture her about this forever. And you can, just like Andrew said, if you are passionate about one thing, you will inspire someone else. And that someone else can go inspire another person or another 2 people or 3 or 4. And it's a little domino effect. It's a little chain. You will get to a point where just because you said it, or just because you were passionate about it, just because you had, the courage to go out and look into this and make a change, people will follow. At the end of the day, we are followers. And we will make a change. We will make a change. So thank you, everyone, for listening to us today. This is definitely one of our longest episodes, but I'm so proud of it. I'm so proud of it. I'm so happy that we had the access to so much knowledge, and we were able to have Andrew on the show today talk to us about, a little bit more of the scientific side of it and how there are changes being made. It's not just all negativity. I feel like sometimes we get down because it's like, oh my God, the whole ocean is dying and we can't do anything about it. Like, what am I going to do about it? I know Tracey and I felt like that a couple of weeks ago because we were just, so devastated that all of these bad things.
Like, we're going to die. Like, the ocean's dying. We're dying, guys. We have no more oxygen.
Literally, that was her on Twitter. Like, literally, she was like, guys, we're going to die if we do not take care of the ocean. And I mean, in a very, couple of years from now, it is a possibility. And that's why, so many people are working for it right now. But do not feel disencouraged by it. We can do something about it.
Absolutely.
We can, and we are going to go ahead and leave those organizations in either our bio. We'll go ahead and make a link tree with all of the different ones, or we'll leave it in the description of the video, just so you guys can feel as inspired as we are and go donate.
Love it.
Thank you again for listening, guys. I'm not sure what episode this is. I think it's episode 12.
12.
Thank you so much for listening, and thank you so much for just you know being with us again and just supporting our dream of having a platform for everyone to share their stories and share what they want to have in their change in the world. Remember that this episode was brought to you by Border Town Pet Services and our mother network, AOTB, Aliens on the Border. Again, this is, all the time that we have today, but thank you so much for tuning into your favorite podcast. That's just my opinion.
Bye, guys.